Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tellwell editing webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Simon Ogden, and I am the in-house editor at Tellwell Publishing. This is one in a series of videos to guide you through your book editing process with us. You can watch these videos really in any order you like, but this is perhaps a good one to start with. The others delve into the nuts and bolts of the editing process, things like what specific services we offer, what they entail, getting started with your editing, who our editors are, and then we get into the software itself and the editing tools that we work with at Tellwell. So today we're going to be looking at the broader questions of editing, delving into the author-editor relationship, what it actually means to work with an editor as part of your process of composing your book. This webinar is for our authors who are new to the editing process to offer a clearer understanding of what this time-honored and uniquely trusting relationship can offer you as you work toward your final draft, and also what it cannot. It's always a nerve-wracking experience when you first begin to share your book with new people, especially when you know that they're looking at it with any kind of critical eye. So editing has long been viewed as a mysterious and somewhat fraught area of the business. I think it's fair to say there are often misgivings and perhaps some misunderstandings of what actually takes place during editing and how your editor is approaching their job when they dig into your manuscript. So today we want to take a look under the hood at the working relationship of editing and authoring, provide some clarity, and put any potential worries that may be tingling around the edges to rest. Before anything else, I think it's important to note that every book you have ever read and loved has been put out into the world through a meticulous and trusting partnership between its author and its editor. A process that can sometimes go on for many months. Editing has been considered an indispensable part of the book production process since at least the 1440s, probably right after Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. When professional writers today find an editor that they vibe with, they create a partnership that can last the author's entire career. In traditional publishing companies like Penguin, Random House, etc., editing is considered fundamental to bookmaking, and we think so too. So it's just a bit more to consider when you're self-publishing because it's yet another expense, and early on in your writing career, it might not seem like something that's absolutely necessary. So the great hope for our time together today is to help you decide if it's something that's worth your hard-earned money and how exactly it can help the sales of the book when it's out in the marketplace. So let's start with introductions. Who are you? You're an author with a certain expertise in a particular area. This might be the story of your life that you wish to share, or some accumulated wisdom on a particular subject that you're publishing so others can benefit, or in telling a story to take us on some fantastic journey away from our own lives and into the worlds you create. And who am I? I am a professional editor, and I'm a member of the large team here at Tellwell who are available for hire to help you realize the full potential of your book. The job of editing is strange in that despite its long-held and integral place in the publishing landscape, there's still not a widely accepted course of study for it offered by most colleges and universities. So people tend to come to editing circuitously after studying communications or English, literature, all of which are part of the job of the editor, but nowhere near all of it. There are a few institutions teaching full editing courses now, which is great, but these are still few and far between. And a big reason for that is that the scope of skills that a good editor must possess is so much broader than commonly understood, so it's hard to include it all into a single course, I think. But we all have one thing in common. We editors, we love to read, and we do it a lot during work, before work, and after work. If you've watched the other webinars in this series, you'll know that even the term editing means different things at different times, depending on what your book is in need of, be it structural or stylistic editing, simple copy editing, proofreading, or manuscript evaluation. Each of these requires its own skill set. So we have to be able to completely swap hats with each one of these edits. So it's no wonder to me that there can be some misunderstandings about what exactly your editor does. Common misunderstandings we've encountered, and they include things like, my editor is going to change my voice to make my book sound like theirs instead of mine. My editor is going to rewrite my book so it's a bestseller is another one. I'll have to do everything my editor says. My book will be 100% error-free after a round of editing. Or it's too expensive for my return on investment is a common concern. The editing process will be quick and easy is an expectation sometimes. My editor needs to be an expert in my book's subject matter, or even I will have to give up complete creative control of my book. So we're going to address these concerns and a few more, and we'll do it in order. So let's start off with the number one all-time top of the pops misconception about editing. This is the one that is indisputably the main concern we hear from our authors as they venture into editing. This is that your editor is going to rewrite your book in the way that they would have written it, thereby altering or removing what is uniquely you about the book, what we call your voice. This is completely understandable, of course, and fortunately, it couldn't be further from the reality of working with a good editor. If you find yourself with an editor who is changing your natural voice and overwriting it with their own, you found yourself a bad editor, and you should fire them immediately. We have none of these types at Tellwell, I promise. It's the hallmark of a good editor to be able to get in sync with your voice and to keep it consistent all the way through the book. Your editor's job is to strengthen your natural rhythms and diction, not diminish them so it sounds like they belong to a different writer. This is the skill that a professional editor possesses that separates them from non-editors who are good at one specific component of writing, be it composition or grammar or punctuation, say. And this is the main reason you should hire a pro editor if you want your book to be the best it can be and to give it its best chance at market. Editors are not necessarily writers, although a good many of us are, for sure. There are many who don't care to write at all. So unique is the craft of editing from writing. But much more importantly, editors are readers, as I mentioned earlier. We read constantly and voraciously, ingesting as many styles and genres and personalities of books as we can. We do this because we love them, first of all, and it's this all-encompassing absorption that suits us so well as a partner who is subordinate to the composition of your book and not in any way a co-writer. We love discovering and supporting our author's styles and rhythms, and more than anything, fine-tuning the author's voice so its maximum impact can ring out over the experience of enjoying it. We're coaches and cheerleaders and fans, certainly, but we're not authors of your project. That's all you. So said in another way, editing is not ghostwriting. Ghostwriting is a completely different profession. Editing is unbiased suggestion-making from an informed expert. Editors want to make sure your choices are as strong as they can be, so they have the most impact they possibly can. That's it. Everything an editor does feeds into that idea. Indeed, your voice is fully realized through the editing process, as small tidbits of confusing construction and repetition and overwriting are pared back to let your rhythms and the force of your argument soar. It's worth mentioning at this point that there's a flip side to this that is sometimes raised before editing begins, which is a hope that the editor is going to rewrite the author's work and make it perfect. We can't really do that either. We're in the service of the work as it is expressed by the talents of the author, and the principle that we are not ghostwriters goes for this one too. We have to start with the manuscript you provide, hammered into the best shape you can get it into with your available resources before we start editing. This may mean asking a coworker or a relative who's a writer or a serious book lover for their opinion, and you should have done all the self-editing you can do before you start paying for a professional editor. It's important to know that the better the condition your manuscript is in when your editor receives it, the deeper that they can go into the edit, and the more bang for your buck, essentially. So your editor can't take a rough outline and color it in with their own composition. We can only tighten and streamline and polish yours. The work you put into your manuscript after it's sent back from your editor is another full draft, and everything in it that eventually goes to print will represent your skill as a writer. Your editor might offer example sentences to concisely illustrate a point they're trying to make, but this is really just rough sketching. It's always up to you to fill in the shades and colors. And this leads us straight into another misconception we encounter in working with new writers, that you have to do everything your editor says. Let's put this one to rest quickly. Every suggestion you get from your editor at Tellwell is merely that. It's a recommendation to be considered, then integrated or discarded as you see fit. You're the author, but you're also the publisher. So take time with each element of your editor's feedback, have a look at it from the new angle, and either make the change or stick to your original version, or find a middle ground between the two. Essentially, you'll want to listen to your writer's you'll want to listen to your writer's intuition, your gut, if you will, and read both versions out loud, and choose the one that sounds the most clean and clear and closest to what your heart wants to say. That's a great tip there too. Reading your writing out loud is like it's kind of like having another voice in the room to help you. It really helps with sentence rhythm and clarity. Um, in traditional publishing, the author works in concert with the publisher, and both add various ingredients and they stir it until they get a book that suits the interests of the company, first and foremost, and hopefully the author as well. In self-publishing, again, you are both the author and the publisher, so your editor works for your vision completely. This is why you don't have to worry that you'll lose creative control to your editor, which is another common concern. You are always in charge. And your editor is paid only to reinforce your design. There's another common misconception that is as understandable as it is flattering, that the manuscripts returned to the author following editing will be 100% error-free. So the publishing industry at large references a rough margin of error for each round of editing at around 10%. That's the industry standard, and we at Tellwell promise that too. But of course, traditional publishing with its much longer production time is able to run each book through many rounds of edits, which in self-publishing is understandably cost prohibitive. Our editors take enormous pride in catching as many errors as humanly possible in each of their edits, but some always seem to have a pesky tendency to sneak through. So we highly recommend going through your final manuscript again with a fine-tooth comb. And it's always a good idea to pay for a final round of proofreading, which is standard practice for just this consideration. Proofreading is a unique form of editing that takes place after the book is designed and right before publishing. So its purpose is to pick up glaring objective errors that may have been missed or perhaps accidentally introduced during the design process, and it won't address any artistic compositional concerns. It's a great option for our more fastidious authors, we found. Here's a good topic for discussion that we hear from authors on occasion when they express concern that their editor might not be familiar enough with the book's subject matter to be effective in the edit. This is a completely understandable question. The important thing to remember in this regard is that the main function of your editor is to stand in for your readers before publication. So we engage with the material word by word and ask questions as a reader might to you, the author. So your editor works for you, but importantly, they also work in the interest of your audience. And if some aspect of your work isn't making itself clear, your editor will point that out to you, so you will have every opportunity to make the text and your ideas as clear and shiny as possible. If you can express your ideas and insights clearly to your editor, they can make sure the text is accessible to your readership. All the editors at Tellwell have unique backgrounds, credentials, interests, but importantly, we're all strong generalists and we're all skilled researchers. And we can be counted on to have the experience and the education to understand and support whatever it is that you are communicating. That's another thing that's integral to the editor's skill set. Let's talk for a minute about what it's like emotionally to get your edited manuscript back, which is never talked about enough. We all know that feeling that comes from sharing our work with someone new. Nervousness, it sort of reminds us of getting tests back from the teacher. We've heard from authors who wait days before reading what their editor had to say. They won't open their edit for a couple of days because of that impending sense of judgment around this thing that they've poured their heart into, bared their soul in for the world to read. So make no mistake about it. It takes courage to have your work professionally examined and commented on constructively. But it takes just as much good business sense to put yourself through it. Please always remember your editor is in your corner. Once you get to the point of feeling comfortable with this partnership, the ability to re-examine your writing with the advice of a good editor is a huge relief. It bears repeating that your editor only wants your book to be the best it can be. And please remember that it's impossible to have a completely neutral perspective on work that you are intimately familiar with. So a certain amount of letting go is required to get our book to the next level. We as editors have read and worked with every style of writing imaginable, and we love being in service to you and to your publishing dreams. More than anything, we're thrilled that you've taken the time and energy to put this thing you're so excited about into the world, and we honestly feel privileged to be able to offer assistance. Being an author requires an immense amount of vulnerability, and without a doubt, no one respects that as much as editors. This is the foundation that you should take into the editing process so that you're prepared emotionally for working through your edits. It can be challenging when moving from edit to edit and going back and forth on whether or not you're going to take your editor's advice. So it's important to take a lot of breaks, short breaks, but take breaks, and don't let too much time go by before you're back in revision mode. And more than anything, it shows your commitment to the craft and your commitment to your readership. We want to send our books out to be reviewed professionally, so positive word gets out to people who are prepared to buy your book, and your editor works with that top of mind. This may mean killing some of your darlings, as they say, at the recommendation of your editor, letting go of bits of writing that you personally love, but that may not be serving the overall work. And there's no harder decision to make than these, but there are also no clearer signs of your commitment to excellence. Everyone who has ever written a successful book will agree, I'm sure. So here's a list of what you should expect from your relationship with your editor, no matter what the service is you're working through together. Okay, your editor should respectfully challenge the many elements of your writing that add up to a clear and concise story or argument or instruction. Word choice, clarity, sentence construction, the accuracy of assertions, historical accuracy, spelling, and on and on and on. All of that should be challenged where it needs to be. You should both have a desire to make your work the strongest it can be so that it doesn't turn out sounding like someone else's work. You should be provided with insights into areas where the story is not as clear or the argument not as strong as they could be. And your finished book should have as close to bulletproof grammar as is reasonably possible. And this, of course, includes correct spelling. Nothing erodes a reader's confidence in an author quicker than a scattering of typos. So let's talk now a little bit about the cost of editing. I think it's fair to say that when you haven't gone through the editing process before and you get to the consideration of price in the early stages of putting your package together, you'll want to know exactly what you're committing to when you decide to add editing to the bill. It's important to us at Tellwell to be transparent, and you should know why we think you should pay money for editing services as opposed to, say, getting that person in your family or circle of friends who's good with language to do it for you. I've mentioned already that it's considered industry standard for books to be edited professionally, but should you save the money if you don't absolutely have to spend it, is the question. Now, this really comes down to the ambitions you have for your project, to be honest. If you're just looking for a small print run of your book to pass on to your family and friends, they will undoubtedly love your book no matter what shape it's in. But if it's within your budget, a professional copy edit at the very least is going to help you save face with pickier readers by at least removing potentially embarrassing typos. There are always typos. But if you aspire to sell your book to a great many strangers to get it professionally reviewed, and you're going to put some effort into marketing it to build word of mouth, that's another matter. It's just not true that anyone who likes books or is a good writer themselves can be a good editor, unfortunately. Editing is a skill that requires a unique education, and editing courses are very different from creative writing courses. Editing courses teach things like specific genre conventions and tropes, regional publishing standards, established style guidance, nuanced subtleties of grammar and syntax, along with what rules are malleable, meaning what quote unquote rules can actually be broken for artistic effect. We're not pedantic as editors necessarily. We just want the rhythm and the consistency of your book to be strong. But more important than the formal education editors receive is experience. It takes a very long time to develop a nuanced approach to a continuous stream of unique writing styles that we do in our job, and even longer to develop the confidence to holistically review a full book project, maintaining the tone, argument, mechanics over thousands upon thousands of words. I've been a devoted armchair quarterback my whole life, but I shouldn't be in the head coach's shoes during the Super Bowl. Hiring a professional editor is without question an investment toward increasing the possibility of sales and accolades. Working with an editor also means more work for you. Make no mistake about that. There shouldn't be anything quick and easy about the revision process. This is just the immutable law of the land. Writing is rewriting, as they say over and over and over in composition class. When you work with an editor, you get to pull the engine apart, find out where the clunks and squeals are coming from, Clean and grease the parts and put it all back together again. Better, sleeker than it was before. Working with your edits entails preparing a whole new draft. A stronger, tighter, leaner, and more powerful draft. It's actually super fun, I promise. And one final thought to leave you with about working with your editor. The editing process is essentially the last stop in the composition process before a paying reader is sitting somewhere alone and engrossed in your book, and they have no way of stopping and asking for clarity. That's the moment we're working toward, and your editor wants to land that plane with as much grace and power and significance as possible. So to wrap up, I will recap what I've outlined as the responses to the various misconceptions we've collected over the years that we've talked about, to tie up what I've said that editing actually is and what you should expect heading into your own editing process. Okay. Your editor's job is to support your essential voice, to make it read as the most you possible, if you will. They work to strengthen your prose and make it super professional. Your editor will work with what you have written and will not write over top of your work to hit imaginary bestseller guidelines. It's entirely 100% up to you which editorial suggestions you integrate into your book. You're in control of the final product, always. And don't expect a pristine 100% error-free manuscript after editing, but the more editing rounds you undertake, the closer you'll get. Get as much editing as you can afford. And take the time to consider what your expectations are for marketing your book and what the return on investment might be for polishing your manuscript up. And there are no shortcuts to editing. Take all the time you need and make sure you're reconsidering everything through revision rounds. Your editor works for your reader, so they don't necessarily have to be an expert on your book subject matter. That's your department. Your editor will make sure your concepts and story logic are as clear as they can be. And you will never, should never, give up creative control of your book, and your Tellwell editor will never presume to take it. We're here to be your partner and to help you realize your book's full potential. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this has helped shed a little light on the relationship between author and editor and answered some questions that may have presented themselves. If any new questions have arisen after our talk, never hesitate to reach out to your project manager if you've been assigned one, or your publishing consultant if you're still putting your package together. And when you're ready, you can check out the other webinars in this series on our various editing services, getting started with editing and working with our author interface and Microsoft's editing tools on Word. And that's the webinar. I wish you all the very best with your publishing journey, and I hope I get to see your work very soon. Have a great day.